Good morning, everyone. Thank you for joining us for the 6th webinar in the SELCAN series. This session will cover the UN Sustainable Development Goals. My name's Heather and I help to facilitate the running of the SELCAN network, who are your hosts today. And one of our members, Georgia Thompson of the Environment Agency, has a fantastic presentation to share with you. If you have any questions as we go along, please pop them in the Q&A chat and we'll look to answer them at the end of the session. I hope you enjoy the presentation and I'll hand over to Georgia.
Thanks very much, Heather. Today I'm talking about the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals and how we've applied them on the Boston Barrier. So my name's Georgia Thompson. I work for the Environment Agency and I am a Communications and Engagement Officer. I've been working on the Boston Barrier and for 8 years, so quite a while on the project itself. Here is the Boston Barrier. So, global goals, UN SDGs, United Nations Sustainable Development Goals. What are they? So the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development, adopted by all United Nations members in 2015, created the 17 World Sustainable Development Goals, which are more commonly known as the SDGs or the Global Goals. So the SDGs represent a universal call to action to end poverty, protect the planet, and ensure that people enjoy peace and prosperity by 2030. These goals address a wide range of interconnected issues, including poverty, inequality, climate change, environmental degradation, peace, and justice. Seems like a pretty hefty target. But actually at a more local level, the SDGs provide a framework for us to address pressing challenges and work towards a more sustainable and equitable future. So whether it's promoting education or healthcare or driving economic growth or protecting our natural resources, building resilient infrastructure, such as the Boston Barrier, each of the 17 SDGs offer valuable guidance for improving the well-being of community members and safeguarding the environment for future generations. So the Environment Agency's Sustainability Plan, eMission 2030, outlines our ambition for the future and uses hard evidence to change our way of thinking to build sustainability into every decision we make. So we've adopted the SDGs or the global goals as a framework for our eMission 2030 to tackle a broader range of social and economic development issues, as well as just things like flood risk. So to achieve our commitments, we know we'll need to do something different. We'll need to do it with urgency and in partnership with others. So let's take a quick look at all 17 of the goals. Number 1 is no poverty, and poverty in all its forms everywhere. Number 2 is zero hunger, end hunger, achieve food security and improve nutrition and promote sustainable agriculture. Number 3 is good health and well-being, so ensure healthy lives and promote well-being for all ages. Number 4 is quality education, ensure inclusive and equitable quality education and promote lifelong learning opportunities for all. Number 5 is gender equality, achieve gender equality and empower all young women and girls. And number 6 is clean water and sanitation, ensure availability of sustainable management of water and sanitation for all. So these first 6 goals, like no poverty, quality education and clean waste and sanitation, may seem like they're intended for more developing countries, which is partly true, but it's not the whole picture. So, for instance, even developed countries like the UK have 14 million people who are living in relative poverty. And also the UN estimates that there are 870,000 children that go to bed hungry every night. So some more of the goals are 7, affordable and clean energy. 8, decent work and economic growth. 9, industry, innovation and infrastructure. So that's to build resilient infrastructure, promote inclusive and sustainable industrialisation and foster innovation. So 10, reduce inequalities within and among countries. 11, sustainable cities and communities. Make cities and human settlement inclusive, safe, resilient, and sustainable. 12, responsible consumption and production. Ensure sustainable consumption and production patterns. So as the focus here turns to energy, employment, economic growth, and urban development, we see how the goals are not only for developing countries, but also for more economically developed countries as well. And some of these you could probably quite see how they would apply to, big infrastructure projects like the Boston Barrier. So these are the last ones. 13, climate action. Something SELCAN is working towards. Take urgent action to combat climate change and its impact. 14, life below water, which is conserve and sustainably use the ocean, seas, and marine sources for sustainable development. 15, life on land. Protect, restore, and promote sustainable use of terrestrial ecosystems, sustainably manage forests, combat desertification, and halt and reserve land degradation and halt biodiversity loss. 16 is peace, justice, and strong institutions. Promote peaceful and inclusive societies for sustainable development. Provide access to justice for all and build effective, accountable, and inclusive institutions at all levels. Number 17, partnership for the goals. Strengthen and means of implementation and revitalise the global partnership for sustainable development. So from these, can you see how the SDGs are about issues that are occurring on a global scale? They're affecting us all. One reason awareness of the global goals are spreading so rapidly over the world, even more so than the predecessors, the Millennium Development Goals, it might be because they affect all of us, both in developing and developed countries and on a wide range of levels. So the quality of work environments as well as economic growth. So how do the SDGs apply to flood risk management? So there are some direct ways, such as 1.5, which is by 2030, build the resilience of the poor and those in vulnerable situations and reduce their exposure and vulnerability to climate-related extreme events and other economic, social and environmental shocks and disasters. 13.1, which is around strengthening resilience and adaptive capacity to climate change. And 11.5, which is by 2030, significantly reduce the number of deaths and the number of people affected and sustainable decrease in direct economic losses produced by natural disasters. So the reality is the risk of flooding will increase with climate change and population growth. And our vision for a nation resilient to flooding and coastal change, we can clearly see adaptation, resilience and mitigation within these SDG targets and indicators. So when we talk about our targets in the Environment Agency for Better Homes Protected, we often say that sustainability is how we meet those targets and not something we think about alongside it. So there are a few challenges we face within the Environment Agency and across all kind of public sectors, which is money is increasingly tight. And on top of that, we have that background of the climate and natural and social emergency. So we know we're running out of options for traditional flood defences. We know that adaptation, resilience and integrated approaches are where we need to focus our efforts. And we know we need a mindset shift in flood risk management thinking. So working with others to deliver those collective ambitions is the only way we're going to solve these issues as we see further sea level rise and rainfall events in the future. So we've found that the Sustainable Development Goals provide a really good framework and a language that people across businesses, local government and communities want to use because they can see how it applies to them. So the goals connect all disciplines, all professions, all sectors, and unite us to a single vision of that better future. So tracking the impact of the projects against the SDG targets and using those targets to shape what projects can deliver may seem like an added extra, particularly when those budgets and programs are tight. But in reality, stretched resources against increasing challenges is the very reason we should be thinking this way, more holistically. So the global goals are a tool and an opportunity to help us reframe our thinking at the earliest stages of the potential project. And we've found that they shift our thinking from a flood risk problem and houses that need defending to kind of think more broadly of a community in a river catchment with a range of challenges and opportunities. It really makes you think about everything a lot more holistically. So I'll give you a bit of background about Boston now before we dive into how we applied the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals on the project. So Boston has a history of tidal flooding. It flooded in 1953, 1978, most recently in December 2013. It reached 6.08 meters AOD in 2013. And basically the flood defences around town average around 6 meters. So overtopped defences, damaged defences, and 800 properties flooded across 55 streets. It happened in December. It was right before Christmas. It was the evening that Nelson Mandela died as well. So it wasn't actually really big news, but over 800 properties flooded, and some lives were completely ruined from that. So if the Boston Barrier had been in place on the 5th of December, it could have prevented the town from flooding. What happened that night galvanised the need for the Boston Barrier, and that commitment was made soon after to build it. So looking at the pictures, you can see 2013, people being rescued, the Boston Borough Council CCTV footage from that night. And then 2019, you can see the barrier after it being delivered. And then in 2020, when we used it for the first time, and this is it now. So if you have a look from the images from the left to right on the top, that's the primary barrier gate design. And the second picture's when it was first delivered. And then the next one is the dry testing. And you can see there on the right, the operation. So the bottom image as well is a panorama of the first deployment of the barrier against a high tide, which was on the 7th of November 2021. So the centrepiece for the scheme is, of course, the 28 metre wide, 362 tonne rising sector gate, which is housed in a 6,000 metre cubed reinforced concrete barrier structure. So the 5 metre thick, 12 metre high walls each support a 55 tonne hydraulic ram and all mechanical and electrical equipment required for its operation. The 4 metre thick base slab contains a curved recess for the barrier to sit in when it's open. So the barrier usually is open for navigation and is only shut when we need to use it against a high tide. So the gate was manufactured in the Netherlands and transported via barge across the North Sea. And when the barrier is lowered, it sits flush in that concrete recess on the riverbed to allow those navigational craft to safely pass above it. The scheme also involved the construction of 1 kilometre of hard flood defence walls with a 100-year design life, taking into account forecast climate change, incorporating a public footpath, the Millen Way, which we've improved quite significantly with wildflower seed mixes, artwork, and improved walkways. And we know that the local community have been very patient with us during this first phase. There was a lot of piling needed for the flood walls, which involved hammering up to 18-metre long steel sheets to reinforce the embankments on either side of the barrier for over a kilometre. So this is a video of what the project looks like now. So in December 2020, the primary barrier gate was officially opened and became fully operational. The barrier will only be operated when the tidal surge is forecasted and will be triggered through our forecasting. So the barrier will only so this will basically be to better protect Boston and the surrounding area. But for now, the plan is for the barrier to only go up at peak tide, which is probably will be about 1 to 3 times a year, and for maintenance purposes, which is currently once a month. But we know that this is going to become more frequent in the years to come as the impacts of climate change and rising sea levels become more pronounced. We'll talk a little bit more about the key benefits as we go over the Sustainable Development Goals, but some of the key ones are, the barrier better protects over 13,700 properties against tidal flooding, and that 1 in 300 year event for the next 100 years, and that's also including allowances for climate change. There's better tidal flood protection to local, not just the local properties and people living within the area, but also hospitals, schools, highways, electricity substations, emergency services. And the scheme also delivers economic benefits of over $1 billion. In fact, it could be more. It could be much more higher than that figure. But I'm told we stopped counting as soon as the economic case was justified. So it could be well over benefits of over $1 billion. So also around the local area, we spent £11 million on the construction within the local economy. So that's within 50 miles of the site. And then there'll be lots of kind of public artwork, and we've also introduced some nationally rare plant species, the Boston horsetail along Macmillan Way, and then there's the potential flexibility to use the barrier gate at a future date for water level management, which could create a Boston to Peterborough wetland corridor potentially in the future. So, the UN SDGs and how we applied them to the Boston barrier. This is a quote from our previous chair of the Environment Agency, Emma Howard-Boyd. Basically, the Environment Agency is increasingly using the global goals across their work nationally to create better solutions and embed social environmental considerations throughout the decision-making process. The UN SDGs weren't developed specifically for construction, but we mapped them against our scheme retrospectively and now use them as a way to monitor and evaluate success, and we'll continue to do so as we go into phase 2 of the scheme. So the SDGs are now a focal point for the scheme, and we shared learning with the wider Environment Agency networks and our delivery partners such as Mott MacDonald and BAM Nuttall throughout the process. So this has led to something we're really proud of, which is that there's now been a rollout of the Sustainable Development Goal framework across the Environment Agency projects to contextualise those goals. So every major project delivered by the Environment Agency will now be tracked, managed and reported on through its benefits management process to demonstrate our contribution towards those Sustainable Development Goals. And if you apply those at the beginning of a project, it really makes you think about how you can holistically contribute towards the environment that you're building in. So it's a really good focus, right from the beginning. So here are a few of the examples of how we've contributed to the goals in a holistic way. So number 9 is industry, innovation and infrastructure. So through collaborative working and the use of building information modelling, business information modelling, sorry, reduce the construction duration of phase 1 by approximately 12 weeks. So through early interventions, we've reduced risk and change and achieved savings of over £10 million. There's been efficiency and opportunity workshops with our partners, which also achieved further savings of excess of £8 million. So the BIM model helped us build it twice. So in a collaborative space, we built the barrier over and over again, many times virtually. So we only had to build it once in the right way, built physically. So this not only helped us to save money, but also reduce carbon and helped us test health and safety features of the barrier in a safe way, which I'll go over more on in the following slides. So number 4, quality education. We utilised our community hub, visited schools and events in the local area. And even me presenting to you today, we're contributing to UN SDG 4. So this is really important. There are many skill gaps for climate-focused jobs, and we've been working with local primary schools, Boston College, engineering department, and attending careers events in the area to help inspire the next generation, hopefully, of engineers, project managers, environmental specialists, etc. And we've got a few STEM ambassadors on the project. So we're hoping to kind of help foster a sense of understanding of the local environment, and we hope that by kind of giving a tangible local case study, it will ignite the imagination of our young communities from that early age. So SDG 1, no poverty. That's build the resilience of the poor and those in vulnerable situations. Kind of Boston has struggled in the past with issues of deprivation and low wages, and we're hoping that the Boston barrier reduces the exposure of the communities to those kind of extreme climate-related tidal events, and should give communities respite from the psychological impacts and the constant fear of flooding again. So having to rebuild your lives on top of your daily struggles, it's not needed. And we're hoping that it may also help to increase investment in the town, and we're already seeing some positive impacts in places. So number 12 is responsible consumption and production. We've enabled various savings to be identified through the project, through things like reusing the dredged material taken from the bottom of the river Haven. We used that to cap off a local landfill site. If we hadn't, we would have had to transport that much further. So actually being able to, by talking to people and realising that we could cap off that local landfill site, it avoided the need for over 30,000 lorry movements, therefore also contributing to UN SDG 13, which is climate action by reducing emissions. So number 15, life on land. So as I mentioned before, the team introduced a population of nationally rare Boston horsetail plants along the Macmillan Way walking trail. So number 17, this is a really big one for us, and I'll go over it a little bit more in further slides as well, is the use of the SDG in monitoring and evaluating the benefits. Has now become that standard practice for the Environment Agency because of us sharing that around. So in the future, we'll continue to share and engage with central government and other organisations, kind of like what I'm doing today, how so how we use those UN SDGs, and how they can deliver even more through investments when we recognise each other's shared goals. So I'll give you some examples of how we've collaborated and innovated across the next slides. So collaborative working. So we knew the success of the project relied on collaboration between many partners. The Environment Agency, we had BAM Nuttall and Mott MacDonald joint venture working on the project as our main delivery partners. We're working in a live port environment as well, the Port of Boston. Local river users such as the fishing fleet. There's a huge amount of local residents in the area who have been very, very patient with us with all the sheet piling and the noise created from that. We had to work quite closely with Boston Borough Council, Lincolnshire County Council, etc. So one of the ways that we have worked with kind of local river users in the area is we collaborated with the Port of Boston and used HR Wallingford's UK ship simulation. So that's what you can see in the bottom right hand of the screen, to use it for the first time to create a virtual navigation simulation. So this was the first time in the centre's history when the system had been adapted to include leisure craft. So the river users, kind of piloted their vessels through basically a virtual reality simulation of the river. So they could virtually test the barrier before it was in place on site. So this helped the whole river community understand the future navigation changes and allowed kind of those collaborative discussions take place, which directly influenced our navigation management plan. So as a result of that, we now have emergency landing facilities upstream and downstream of the barrier as a result of those conversations. So we know that the local community and stakeholders are important to ensuring we deliver those successful outcomes. So we also operated a community hub, which was open every Wednesday during the construction of phase 1, pre-COVID. We opened the space from 12 p.m. till 7 p.m. in order to be accessible to as many people as possible. So we knew that, not everyone works a 9 to 5 and would need to come in at different hours. So the space also doubled as a co-located hub for our project team meetings, ad hoc events, workshops with the local community. So we're currently looking for a similar place to host project our drop-ins on the other side of the river when phase 2 begins. So we've collaborated with the local community on a number of local projects recently as well. So one of them you might have seen on London Road in the middle of Boston, the Boston Boys, which we worked with Boston Borough Council on. It's a public artwork project. So you can see the buoy we sponsored on the Boston Barrier viewing platform, which is located on London Road between Blacksluice pumping station and the river. So we've also donated timber hulks, which we found on the riverbed, to the local Boston Woodcarvers Association, who are creating public sculptures with them, which will be displayed on the Macmillan Way footpath, and on that footpath we've also included some motifs which were designed by residents, which kind of depict Boston's seafaring history. So it should hopefully make the environment look a lot nicer on those public walkways too. So some of the organisations we've spoken to already are, the as you can see in the middle, Cubs and Scouts in the area. We've also worked with primaries and secondary school children through STEM engagement and careers fairs. And we've also worked externally with international with our international storm surge barrier network, iStorm. We've had Secretary of State visits. We work with the Wash and North Norfolk Marine Partnership, Dhaka Water Supply, and Sewerage Authority, so the Bangladesh Government Ministry. And we've also had the Dutch Water Authority over Rijkswaterstaat. So here's another way we have contributed towards UN SDG 13, which is climate action. So we've been quite carbon focused within our construction. We're committed to the Environment Agency's goal of achieving net zero by 2030 by reducing our carbon emissions. And our teams are really carbon aware, and our ethos is that low carbon makes pretty good financial sense too. So the concrete mix for the barrier incorporated 70% ground granulated blast furnace slag, so GGBS, which is a byproduct of the iron industry, as a cement replacement. So this saved a total of 1,250 tonnes of carbon emissions across the 6,000 metres cubed concrete required in the barrier structure. But as well as low carbon concrete, we've also used recycled steel and aggregates, solar panel PV, solar panels, air source heat pumps, and also precast components. So if you'd like to find out a little bit more about some of the other carbon reductions we've made on the project, I co-hosted another webinar for SELCAN a couple of weeks ago called Low Carbon Technologies with Phil Callow from ARC ICT. So another one we've contributed to is UN SDG 7, Affordable and Clean Energy. So the barrier control building was designed to be self-sufficient. So we talked about the solar panels before. So the building is only used when the barrier needs operating, and the panels produce a lot of renewable power. And there's also an air source heat pump to offset the general electrical costs throughout the year. So in addition to this, revising some of our designs on the control building structure at an early stage of the process saved the use of 1,500 tonnes of steel and 5,000 cubic metres of concrete, which cut hundreds of tonnes of carbon emissions. I'll also talk a little bit more about that on our low carbon technologies presentation from a couple of weeks ago too. So that kind of concludes some of the ways that we've contributed to the UN SDGs, but I thought I'd quickly tell you a little bit about the second phase of works that are due on the Boston Barrier. So they're due to take place downstream of the first phase and include works on the Port of Boston estate. So you can see kind of technical design drawing on the left-hand side there. So the vertical sector gates have already been constructed and are on site ready for when work commences. So we know that the second phase of works is vital to keep up with future climate change predictions. But whilst it's not imperative that the work is completed now, we've chosen to deliver phase 2 alongside phase 1 to avoid kind of that prolonged disruption to local community, who have been extremely patient whilst the works have been completed. So at present, we're considering the best approach to ensure the completion of it, but should be starting in the next year. So if you would like to find out a little bit more about how we've used the UN SDGs as a framework for the Boston Barrier project, we've worked with the Institution of Civil Engineers in the East Midlands throughout the scheme, and a few of our team, including me, collaborated to create a paper focused on Sustainable Development Goals back in 2020. So it details more about the scheme as a whole, and how we've successfully reached those positive outcomes across all 17 of those goals. You can read it on the ICE's website. Just search Boston Barrier, or we can share you the link if you get in touch. 70% of the world's CO2 emissions can be traced back to infrastructure, and 45% of EA carbon production comes from infrastructure construction. We know, as the Environment Agency, we need to lead by example. It's in our name to become sustainable. But climate change will not wait for businesses and individuals to catch up. And we know we'll need to work together to tackle it in the future. Climate change is the biggest threat we face. It requires integrated thinking, and it will require collaboration to deliver those multi-outcome values. So for the partnership mindset to really thrive, we all need to see challenge as opportunity. So we're shifting our mindset from a problem to an opportunity to creatively do something better. It isn't just about the communities at risk of flooding that are facing challenges. Businesses doing their own climate risk assessments or global goals impact analysis will know what potential threats they face, and also what opportunities are open to them to work with others and be creative about their wider contributions. Private businesses are increasingly accepting their role in society beyond profit making, and so are becoming more open to working collaboratively to deliver more than a single outcome, a product or a service. So my final note is to remember that this isn't just about our professional lives. So the Good Life goals set out personal actions, and you can look at the Good Life goals website for further information. They have 85 individual actions, 5 asks for each action of the 17 SDGs. So if you have a look at these, they've got, I'll use the example of Good Life Goal 7, which is use clean energy. It's a much more personal look at the SDGs and how you can incorporate them within your life. So Good Life Goal 7, use clean energy. Find out where your energy comes from is number 1. Number 2 is save energy where you can. Is renewable energy for heat, light and power. Use it if you can. Number 4 is buy from companies powered by renewable energy. And number 5 is to demand clean, affordable energy for everyone. So they're quite actionable. Kind of by us individually embracing those sustainable development goals, we can empower ourselves to take meaningful action at the grassroots level. It's not just for big business. And so whether through volunteering, advocacy, or sustainable practices in our daily lives, each of us has a role to play in changing the world for better. Thank you.
Lovely. Thank you, Georgia. That was really, really interesting. I think you've demonstrated really well there how using those goals as a sort of framework for projects, you can really achieve a multitude of benefits. So that was brilliant. Thank you. For anybody interested in attending some upcoming sessions, we've got 2 webinars left in this series. One is around managing carbon emissions in food manufacturing and understanding agricultural policy. That will be taking place in a couple of weeks' time. And then following on from that, there's a final session in the series around the benefits of circular economy and disposing of waste. If you'd like to find more about those, please contact me on the email address on the screen, or of course you can sign up using the registration form that you used for today. We haven't had any questions in the chat, so we'll wrap up there for today. But thank you all for joining us, and thank you to Georgia for a great presentation. Thank you all.
Thanks so
Goodbye.
much.